It started with the fire, a blaze so fierce it turned the sky orange and filled the air with thick, suffocating smoke. Firefighter Jake Larson had seen his fair share of destruction, but this one was different. The fire had ripped through a stretch of forest on the outskirts of town, leaving behind little more than ash and ruin. As Jake and his team battled the flames, something caught his eye. A small, trembling figure crouched near a fallen tree. At first, he thought it was just another animal caught in the devastation. But as he stepped closer, he realized it was a wolf pup, its fur singed, its eyes wide with fear. Jake had always been trained to focus on the mission, but something about the pup made him pause. It was alone, no sign of its mother or a pack. The little creature barely moved, exhausted and frightened. Knowing he couldn't leave it there, he carefully scooped the pup into his arms and carried it to safety. After checking with the local wildlife rescue, they assured him they'd take care of it. Relieved, he left the pup in their hands and returned to his station, assuming that was the last he'd see of it. But just days later, something unexpected happened. Jake had just finished a long shift when he heard a soft whimper outside his door. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but when he opened the door, he froze. There, sitting on his porch, was the same wolf pup, staring up at him with those same deep, knowing eyes. How had it found him? It should have still been at the rescue, miles away, and yet here it was, waiting for him. Jake hesitated before kneeling down. The pup didn't run, it didn't flinch. It simply looked at him, as if it had something to say, something important. Jake knew he should call the rescue center, but something about the pup's presence made him stop. It wasn't just lost or scared. It had come back for a reason. And as the days passed, he started to notice strange things happening. The pup seemed to know things it shouldn't. It led him to places, nudging him in certain directions, as if guiding him toward something unseen. At first, he ignored it. He told himself it was all in his head. But then, one night, everything changed. The pup led him deep into the woods, farther than he had ever gone before. His heart pounded as he followed, the shadows of the trees stretching long in the moonlight. And then, just as he was about to turn back, he saw it. Something buried beneath the forest floor, something that would change his life forever. But what was it? And how did the wolf pup know it was there? Jake's mind raced as he took a shaky step forward, the weight of the mystery settling over him. Whatever this was, it wasn't just coincidence. It was something much bigger, something that had been waiting for him all along. Jake took a slow, steady breath, his flashlight beam flickering over the uneven ground. The pup stood beside him, ears perked, eyes locked on the spot just ahead. There was no mistaking it. Something was buried here. He knelt down, pushing aside the damp leaves, his fingers digging into the soft earth. His pulse pounded in his ears. What was he about to uncover? The dirt came away easily, as if it had been disturbed recently. As he dug deeper, his hands brushed against something solid, something unnatural in the middle of the forest. His chest tightened as he pulled away more earth, revealing the edge of an old, rusted metal box. It looked like it had been here for years, maybe decades. Why had the pup led him to this? And why did it feel like he wasn't supposed to find it? For a long moment, Jake hesitated. Every instinct told him to stop, to leave it alone. But another part of him, the part that had spent years running into burning buildings, knew he couldn't walk away. He pried the box loose, wiping away the dirt. The latch was rusted shut, but with enough effort, it gave way with a sharp snap. The lid creaked as he lifted it, and inside, wrapped in layers of old cloth, was something unexpected. A stack of yellowed papers, brittle with age. Jake unfolded the first page, his breath catching as he read the faded words. It was a letter. The handwriting was messy, rushed, but the message was clear. It spoke of a secret, something hidden, something dangerous. His eyes flickered over the words, trying to piece together the meaning. There were names he didn't recognize, dates that went back decades. And at the bottom, barely legible, was a signature, one that sent a cold chill through him. He knew that name. It wasn't just some stranger's signature. It belonged to someone who had vanished years ago, someone whose disappearance had remained an unsolved mystery in their town. Jake swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the fragile paper. This wasn't just a lost letter. This was a clue, a thread connecting the past to the present. And somehow, this wolf pup, this small, seemingly ordinary creature, had led him straight to it. His mind raced with questions. Who had buried this box? Why was it hidden here, deep in the woods? And how had the pup, barely old enough to survive on its own, known exactly where to find it? Jake glanced down at the wolf pup, still sitting patiently beside him. It didn't seem afraid. If anything, it looked like it had been waiting for this moment all along. As the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the distant sounds of the night, Jake knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Jake stood in the quiet of the woods, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. The night air felt colder now, as if the trees themselves held their breath. He read through more of the brittle pages, his hands steady despite the unease creeping into his chest. The letters hinted at something dark, something deliberately erased from the town's history. A cover-up, a hidden truth. The more he read, the more he felt like he was staring into a past that had never been meant to resurface. The wolf pup nudged his leg gently, pulling him out of his thoughts. Its eyes were filled with something, expectation, urgency. Jake didn't know why, but he felt like the pup wanted him to understand, to keep going. He carefully placed the letters back into the box and closed the lid. He needed answers. Someone in town had to know something. The first person that came to mind was Old Man Dawson, the town's retired sheriff. He had been around long enough to know the kind of secrets people didn't write in history books. But as Jake drove toward Dawson's house, a nagging thought crept in. If this mystery had been buried for so long, how far would someone go to keep it that way? As he parked outside Dawson's small, dimly lit cabin, the unease in his gut grew. The front door was slightly open, swaying in the wind. Jake hesitated, every instinct telling him something was wrong. The wolf pup let out a low whimper, its small body tense. He stepped inside, calling out Dawson's name. No answer, just silence. Then, from deeper inside the house, a floorboard creaked. Jake wasn't alone. Jake's pulse pounded in his ears as he stepped deeper into the cabin. The air inside was thick with dust and something else, something off. The dim light from the hallway barely reached the living room, casting long shadows against the walls. The wolf pup stayed close to his heels, ears pinned back, body tense. "Dawson!" Jake called again, his voice low. Still nothing. Then another sound, a faint rustling coming from the back of the house. Jake moved carefully, his boots barely making a sound on the creaky wooden floor. He reached the doorway of Dawson's study and pushed it open. The room was a mess. Papers scattered, drawers pulled out, an old desk lamp flickering weakly. But Dawson wasn't there. Instead, the back door stood wide open, swinging slightly in the night breeze. Someone had been here. Maybe they still were. The wolf pup let out a low growl, staring toward the darkened tree line just beyond the door. Jake felt a chill creep up his spine. He knew better than to ignore a warning like that. He reached for his phone, but before he could dial, something outside caught his eye. Movement just beyond the trees. A shadow disappearing into the forest. Someone was watching. Jake's instincts kicked in. Whoever had been inside wasn't just looking for something. They had been waiting for something, or someone. He stepped out onto the porch, the night air thick with tension. The pup stood beside him, still watching the trees. Then, suddenly, it bolted, racing toward the woods with a sense of purpose Jake couldn't ignore. Without thinking, he ran after it, his heart hammering as he plunged into the darkness. Whatever was waiting out there, he was about to find out. Jake ran blindly into the forest, branches whipping against his arms as he followed the pup's fast-moving form. The night was thick with shadows, the towering trees swallowing any moonlight. His breath came fast, his pulse hammering in his ears, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The wolf pup wasn't just running, it was leading him somewhere. Then, just ahead, the pup skidded to a stop. Its body was low, its ears back. Jake slowed, scanning the darkness for what had made it freeze. And that's when he saw it. A figure, half hidden behind the trees, just barely visible. For a split second, Jake thought it was an animal, but then the figure moved, slowly, deliberately. A person, watching. Jake took a cautious step forward. "Who's there?" His voice was steady, but his hand instinctively rested on the radio at his belt, ready to call for backup. No answer. Then, without warning, the figure turned and vanished into the trees. Jake hesitated only for a moment before taking off after them. Whoever it was, they had been near Dawson's cabin. They had been watching. That meant they knew something. Maybe they had even taken Dawson. The chase was reckless. Roots and uneven ground threatened to trip him with every step, but Jake kept going. The figure was fast, slipping between trees like they knew this forest better than anyone. But then, just as suddenly as the chase began, it ended. The figure was gone, no footsteps, no sound, as if they had vanished into thin air. Jake cursed under his breath, turning in a slow circle. The forest felt different now, heavier, as if it was holding its breath. The wolf pup let out a soft whimper, circling around a specific spot. Jake stepped closer. The ground beneath him felt different, softer. Then he saw it, another disturbance in the earth, just like where he had found the metal box. His stomach tightened. Whatever was buried here, it had to be connected. He knelt down and brushed away the dirt. But before he could dig further, a sound shattered the silence. A twig snapped. Close, too close. Jake shot to his feet, heart pounding. He wasn't alone, someone was still here, watching, waiting, and this time they weren't running. Jake's breath was sharp and controlled as he turned, scanning the darkness. He could feel someone watching, just beyond the reach of his flashlight. The wolf pup stood firm, its gaze locked in one direction. Then another sound, a deliberate step. Whoever was out there wasn't hiding anymore. "Come out," Jake called, his voice steady. No response. Then, from the shadows, a man stepped forward. His face was rugged, weathered by time, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. Jake tensed. He didn't recognize him, but something about him felt familiar. "You don't know what you're messing with, Firefighter," the man said, his voice low. Jake's grip on the flashlight tightened. "Then maybe you should tell me." The man exhaled, glancing at the disturbed ground. "You weren't supposed to find that box," he muttered, "and you sure as hell weren't supposed to keep digging." Jake's mind raced. The letters, Dawson's disappearance, this stranger lurking in the woods, it was all connected. "Where's Dawson?" he demanded. The man smirked. "Safe, for now." Jake took a step forward. "What's buried here?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulling out something small, a folded piece of paper. He tossed it toward Jake, who caught it instinctively. "You want the truth? You're standing on it." Jake hesitated before unfolding the note. His eyes scanned the faded writing, and suddenly everything clicked. The letters, the hidden secrets. This wasn't just an old mystery, it was a cover-up. Decades ago, a wildfire had swept through these very woods, but it hadn't been an accident. The town's leaders had buried something, or someone, out here, and Dawson had been the last person alive who knew the truth. Jake looked up, but the man was already backing away. "Walk away, Firefighter, some things are meant to stay buried." But before Jake could respond, The wolf pup let out a sharp bark and took off after the man. The stranger turned, disappearing into the trees, his footsteps fading into the night. Jake stood frozen, his mind spinning. The truth was right beneath him, buried in the earth. But now he had a choice: dig up what had been hidden for so long, or let the past stay buried. As the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the distant howl of the wolf pup, Jake knew one thing for certain: this story wasn't over. Not yet. Jake stood in the quiet of the forest, the paper still clutched in his hand. The stranger had vanished, swallowed by the night, but his warning echoed in Jake's mind. Walk away, let it stay buried. But could he? Could he ignore the truth now that he had come this far? The wolf pup circled back, its eyes searching his face as if waiting for him to decide. Jake exhaled, glancing down at the disturbed earth beneath his feet. He had spent his life running toward danger, toward answers. But for the first time, he hesitated. Then, in the distance, the faint wail of sirens cut through the night. Someone had called it in. Maybe Dawson, maybe someone else. Either way, help was coming. Jake wasn't alone in this anymore. He took one last look at the buried secret beneath him. He didn't need to dig. The truth wasn't just in the ground, it was in the letters, in the fear behind the stranger's words. Whatever had happened all those years ago, the town's leaders had erased it for a reason, and now someone was still trying to keep it hidden. As the first red and blue lights flickered through the trees, Jake made his decision. He picked up the box, the old letters, and the note the stranger had given him. If someone thought they could bury the past, they were wrong. This wasn't over. He would take what he had found to the authorities. He would find Dawson, and he would get answers. The pup let out a small yip, wagging its tail as if sensing the shift in Jake's resolve. He knelt down, scratching behind its ears. Guess we're in this together, huh? The sirens grew louder, voices calling out as officers arrived. Jake stepped forward, ready to tell them everything. The past had tried to stay buried, but tonight the truth had been uncovered. And no matter how deep the secrets went, Jake wasn't about to turn back now. As he walked toward the flashing lights, the wolf pup trotting by his side, he knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning of a much bigger story.